Columbus, Georgia, a river city deep in the south, far from the nearest ocean. Here, on the banks of the Chattahoochee, a warship was born. Not in the sprawling Mabel yards of Norfolk or Charleston, but in the quiet town of mills, foundries, and riverboats. Her name was the CSS Jackson, an ironclad, a dream, and the shadow of a nation on the brink of collapse. Across back roads and forgotten towns, the past lives on. Not in textbooks, but in weathered plaques, quiet museums, and the stories we nearly lost. I'm Pelham Pugh, and this is American Shadows, uncovering the people, places, and relics that shaped our American history. The Confederacy's dream of an iron navy was always chasing time. Union blockades strangled southern ports. Gunboats prowled the Mississippi and its tributaries, cutting supply lines and splitting the South in two. The only hope was to fight back with technology, ironclads that could outmatch wooden fleets. Columbus became a naval hub almost by necessity. The city had resources, skilled labor, sawmills, foundries, and relative safety, at least in the early years of the war. Here, Confederate engineers designed the Jackson, sometimes called the Muskogee. She would be massive, 220 feet long, 60 feet across the beam, clad in iron plating, armed with heavy guns meant to strike terror into any ship that challenged her. Building such a ship wasn't simple. The Confederacy lacked industry, iron, and time. The work dragged on, slowed by shortages and desperation. By the time the Jackson neared completion in 1864, the war was already slipping away. The Jackson was meant for the Chattahoochee, and beyond that, the Gulf of Mexico. She was a weapon of defiance, designed to protect inland waters and maybe, just maybe, turn the tide. To those who built her, the Jackson was more than a warship. She was a statement that the South could still rise against overwhelming odds. But the war doesn't wait for dreams. Sherman's march carved through Georgia. Union troops pressed deeper into the South. By the spring of 1865, Columbus, the ship's birthplace, was no longer safe. April 1865. The Confederacy was in its final days. Lee had surrendered at Appomattox. Union troops advanced toward Columbus, and the Jackson, newly launched, towering over the Chattahoochee, was still unfinished, still untested. She had never fired her guns in anger. Rather than let her fall in the enemy hands, Confederate defenders made a grim decision. They set her ablaze. Flames roared through her timbers. Smoke billowed into the southern night sky, and the mighty ironclad, years in the making, was consumed in a single night. The Jackson died before she ever truly lived. For almost a century, the Jackson lay hidden beneath the waters of the Chattahoochee. Charred remains sank into the mud. The river kept her secrets well. But in 1961, divers brought her back, piece by piece, timber by timber. The bones of the Jackson rose from the depths. Salvage crews hauled her blackened remains to the surface and eventually to the National Civil War Naval Museum here in Columbus. Today, the Jackson stands again, not in power, but in silence. Visitors walk among her reels, gaze up at her timbers, and touch the shadow of a dream that burned away before its time. The story of the CSS Jackson is not one of victory or glory. She never saw battle. He never claimed a prize. Her story is one of ambition, desperation, and loss. She embodies the Confederate dream of defiance and its inevitable collapse. But in her remains, we glimpse something more. We see the workers who labored by lantern light, the engineers who believed that iron fire could hold back an empire, the soldiers who chose destruction over surrender. All of them left their mark, not on history's triumphs, but on its shadows. The CSS Jackson is a ghost of iron and oak, a reminder that even the strongest ships can be lost to time, fire, and silence. And yet in these remains, the past still speaks. From the depths of the Chattahoochee, the Jackson rises, not as a weapon of war, but as a shadow of what was and what might have been. If you'd like to dive deeper into the kinds of stories that linger long after the smoke clears, visit PelhamPugh.com, where history meets fiction in the Fractured Horizon series. My first novel, Perfidious Tides, just hit #1 in noir crime on Amazon. It's a southern noir tale of family, betrayal, and justice, set in the same haunted landscapes that we explore here.